Well, hello everybody. Really nice to be back with you again. We're just thrilled to welcome you to our new series on education. We just want to say a big thank you to Chris Arnold for kicking us off in this new series. So thank you very much, Chris. And so lovely to see some familiar faces. So welcome. So I think those of you who've been with us before know that a little introduction spiel, but just for those of you who may be new with us, that's great to you. Would like to introduce you to Jordan, who's our technical support person, to Matt, who's here on my right. Thankfully, with Matt's good counsel, things generally go nice and smoothly. Dr. John Higginbottom, who many of you probably know, it was really his idea, this advanced practice, so we're just very grateful to John, and myself, Regina, being with you this morning. So a welcome. You know that Advanced Practice is funded by the Ministry of Health, and we try to provide some leadership, education, guidance to the mental health field to help develop and put effective evidence-based psychosocial rehabilitation practices into place. So we're very, very grateful to our instructors such as Chris for their support and their expertise. And as Matt mentioned, please do visit our website. We have this is number 23 webinar, so we have some amazing high quality webinars on that website, and we're learning that people from all over the world are accessing them, so of course that makes us feel really good. But nice to know that you have some good quality information to be able to maybe have some team dialogues. Maybe you want to develop a series of dialogues around recovery and PSR within your service, but you may find that those are good resources to work from. What we're trying to do is just transfer that evidence-based knowledge to practice. We hope that we could provide some expert clinician consultation for organizations who are interested in that, providing some training and education events such as this one. We'd like to develop the website resources so that they are of value and of help to you. And finally, part of our role is supporting the Provincial Advisory Committee and the community of PSR practice here in BC. This employment series is the second of two. So 1 year ago, we got $75,000 from the Ministry of Advanced Education to develop this particular ongoing series. And then we're offered an additional $50,000 to create this second series. So we're very grateful to the Ministry of Advanced Education. It means that we can pay some of our presenters for a change and just try to roll out some of our best and promising practices. We need to hear from you, though. We need to hear if we're doing a good job, how we could do things better, what's of value to you. So we very much value that feedback. And additionally, if you have information that you would like to share, either around employment or around other best practices, please contact us, because you are our community and we are trying to advance the knowledge. And many of you out there are doing just stellar work. So we really need to hear from you. This is just a list of the series that we're developing. So today, February 19th, is Chris. So thanks to Chris for starting us off. On March 4th, I'm going to be here by myself. Matt will probably be elsewhere, but so may need your help with technical support on the line. But we're looking forward to welcoming a session on evidence-based model of supported employment. So maybe many of you know Catherine Newstead is returning to provide some information there. The next session is on work integration, social enterprise. So we have some amazing people from back east. Dr. Terry Krupa and Dr. Rosemary Lysat will be joining us to speak about that. We have a powerful lawyer here from British Columbia, Suzanne, who's going to speak to us about workplace law and mental health. Chris will be back with us around positive behavior supports in employment, and then we will finish out the series with a panel. We will likely have one more session to do with Clubhouse and employment, and I do just want to let you know on that March 4th session, so that's the next session, we're gonna start the session that day at 11:30. So it will not be 10:30 as usual, but it will be 11:30, and that's honest to goodness the best laid plan. Sometimes they just need to get changed at the last moment, so I'm sorry for that change, but we do hope that you can join us. So that's next session, March 4th, will be at 11:30.
No, sorry, that's not correct.
That's not correct?
April 29th.
So sorry, April 29th, I apologize. April 29th will be at 11:30, and we will confirm that, and we've changed that information on the website. Thank you, Matt, for keeping me on the straight and narrow there. Need that. Thank you. I just want to also just alert before I leave you just about the upcoming conference, June 20th to 22nd in Thunder Bay. If you have some abstracts that you would like to send in, I believe that you will still be welcome to do that. These are the last few days that they're accepting the abstract. So if you have it, please contact Sherry Slim, or if you need that direct address, please just email us right now and we'll give it to you. But we would love to see you out in Thunder Bay on June 20th to 22nd. We know it's a long way for those of us out here in the West Coast, but it promises to be an amazing conference with Janice Tandora, who does a great work around person-centered care. And also we will be announcing the Psychosocial Rehabilitation registry, phase 1 of the registry. So exciting times for us. Anyway, with all that to be said, we hope we see you in Thunder Bay. And it is now my great pleasure to come to this, the good part of the session, to tell you about dear Chris Arnold. Some of you will have met him last series. Chris has a MS and Master of Science degree in psychology and a master level trainer at non-violent crisis intervention. I know that he has speaking engagements all over British Columbia, and we are lucky people to have this great gentleman. But he is a clinical director of the Provincial Networking Group and also psychology professor with the Northwest Community College, been working in the field of disability for over 25 years. Chris has managed one of the most successful supported employment agencies for over 18 years and is regularly asked to teach and mentor in the area of specialized employment services for people with disabilities. He recently became the first person in Canada to receive their Certified Employment Support Professional designation from USA based on the accrediting body, that's a hard word to say, APSE. Chris joined the Douglas College team as an instructor with the new Advanced Certificate Program Employment Support Specialty. So a warm welcome to you, Chris. Thank you kindly for being with us today.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It's great to be back here, and thanks to the Matt and Regina and the BC Psychosocial Rehab for hosting these great webinars and making them available afterwards as well on demand, so to speak, which is awesome. What we're looking at today is talking about the actual job finding for people with challenges to employment or barriers to employment, and in particular some tips or keys around the actual practice based on our experience in working with people with all different ability levels, and also some of the challenges, because of course you can't just speak about success without also addressing some of the issues that can come up, and I think both are important for balance. And so those are that's sort of our focus. As far as the objectives for today, some of the things that I want to be able to get through by noon is to include identifying the importance of engaging employers. They're a very important part of the work, and I think that we need to have sort of a balanced focus when it comes to how we're approaching job development for people that might have barriers to employment or have challenges with finding employment through traditional means. And so I'll talk a bit about engaging employers as the other client in this process. We also want to look at focusing on examples of turning strengths into opportunities for people. And so, of course, focusing on strength-based approaches is very important in the field of disability and in psychosocial rehab work. And so we want to look at how that relates specifically to employment, articulating issues around possible workplace accommodations for people that we're supporting, and also assessing the possibilities of using tools that may be non-traditional or different or outside of the typical world of employment supports. And so those are some of the areas and objectives that I hope to go through today with you. I'm hoping that I'll have some time for some questions from all of you. There's a good group on here today. And so if you have questions, you can type them in the chat box as we go, and I'll try to watch them, or Matt and Regina can alert me to those. And I'll also hopefully have some time at the end where I can respond specifically to some of those questions if you ask them then. Starting off with this presentation, I wanted to sort of find 5 key factors from our experience in delivery of specialized employment services. 5 key areas for folks that are in a supportive role like ourselves, and having those to go through sort of as our framework. Starting off with first, who you know. And we've all heard that expression, it's who you know, it's not what you know, but who you know. It does also come into play as far as what you know, but certainly who you know, and in particular, how we network in our communities, in the business community, with the people that we support is very important. What we know also is important. Not waiting in line, and I'll talk about some strategies or some examples of how you might be able to take that individual that you might be supporting to obtain work out of that sort of traditional or typical lineup of job applicants, and avoid that line altogether. Looking at having a level playing field, and in particular using a business approach when you're thinking about job development as opposed to a social services or service provider approach only, and also finally seeing opportunity everywhere, having optimism and being optimistic regardless of the current job climate or political climate or anything like that is really important to keep us going in this field as people who support others to achieve employment. So looking at those 5 factors for success as the first part, and then I'll go on to some of the challenges after that. But let's start with that first one. It's who you know. When you look at networking, networking is so important in so many fields where you are supporting or helping other people. Any of the social jobs or industries, networking can be so important. Of course, it's important in business as well, and there's some real connections there in employment because we have both parts, the social through our work as supports, but also the business in trying to sort of help people break through into that world of work and becoming employed. We have to be looking for connections all the time and opportunities to network all the time. We don't want to just be that person. I mean, we all know that person, that friend or that family member or possibly coworker where every time you see them coming to you, like your immediate thought is, what do they want? They want something, they're coming to me. If they're phoning because they want something. We don't want to get into that role with the business community that we're trying to make inroads with. And so in order to help avoid that, we need to be able to network on an ongoing basis. We need to be building and nurturing relationships with the business people in our neighborhoods, in our community, and doing that on an ongoing basis. So the only time they see us isn't when we're actually trying to help connect somebody to a job. Often good connections need to be nurtured and developed over time, and it's some of the stronger relationships that you'll have with business people in the community are those ones that you have nurtured over time, and not just that sort of cold calling or knocking on doors. Use every possible opportunity to make a new connection. And so there's thinking about opportunity being everywhere. You know, you can network wherever you go. Even simple things such as having business cards, available and on you at all times, even if you're not going to specifically a networking meeting or event, but always having those with you, always being available to pass that out to make a connection. In any of the work opportunities, events that you're at, always have in the back of your mind that networking potential, because everybody you meet is in some way connected to employment, whether it's through their own business or job, or whether it's through other people that they know, that they communicate with, that they work with. There's so many ripple effects that can happen if you keep in mind always those opportunities to network. I mean, even attending things like the webinar today, there's opportunities to network. You might see a colleague in the participant list that you haven't seen for a while. I've had people follow up after these webinars and get in touch with me with questions and things like that I was able to then share information with. Those little seeds that you plant, you never know when those are going to come up and be helpful or useful to you down the road or to someone that you support. So networking all the time, finding every opportunity, whether it's traditional ways such as attending events that are for that purpose, or whether it's just through your day-to-day interactions with people, through your agency's own purchasing power. Every time that you're a customer as part of your job, or you're purchasing services or something like that, you have an opportunity to ask questions, to network. And so really thinking about all of that. Even within our own office, we're a small office up here in the Northwest, but even within our own office, we always look within our own teams for networking opportunities. So who's done what in the past? Sometimes we don't even know our coworkers that we work with every day, the different types of jobs or occupations they had before they came into this particular position. And so there's lots of networks, informal, that you can tap into and use and think about when you're looking for help with developing jobs for people. Okay, for the second one is research. And so when we talk about it's what you know. So who you know is important from a networking perspective, but also who you know or what you know. And what you know, I'd look at that as the research that we do within the business community that we might be working in. So when you have people coming to see you that you are going to be supporting to become employed, it's all about doing research. Now, it doesn't mean all the research has to be on your shoulders necessarily, because certainly the individual who's looking for a job can be part of that research as well. And in fact, engaging them in that process can be really beneficial in some cases. You might have been in a situation where you have a person that's coming to you to help them find a job, and early on in the process, they will drop in or call you or email you, and they'll do that thing where they're asking, have you got me a job yet? Have you got me a job yet? And whenever that happens, it makes us think that maybe they're not engaged enough in the process themselves. So having them involved in research can be a helpful idea. So how do we start to find out if we have an idea of a path that somebody's interested in for work? How do we start to learn what we need to know about that industry? How can they start to learn and gather information and contacts within that industry? And so we need to go out, and initially a lot of our focus is on learning about the individual. What are their likes? What are their skills? What are their interests? What accommodations might they need? We're usually pretty good at doing that. We're good at pulling out that information and really researching the people that we support and learning about them. But sometimes where we fall down is on the other side of the equation, which is learning just as much about the potential employers that we're going to be approaching. And so we really need to see them as the other client in this situation, the other person that we need to focus on. Doing your homework is really important. If you're going to be going in and approaching an employer with your job seeker or on their behalf, you need to be able to look like you've actually done some of your homework. And that's really important within the business community. One story that I often tell is that our office in our community is on one of our main business area streets. And so we will often have people that are looking for employment using traditional ways, for example, passing out resumes. And so I'll hear the doorbell go on the front door of our office, and when I go out there, the person is already gone, but there's a resume that's magically appeared on our front counter. And so when I have a look at the resume, we may or may not be hiring at the time. Sometimes people will just randomly drop off resumes. And if they're those very traditional resumes that they kind of did in their resume workshop or online using a resume making tool, there's usually a cover letter or an opening paragraph on the resume. And when I look at that, that's usually the first place that I would look as an employer, as a business person. And when I look at that, I'm always a little bit amused or entertained by seeing what they put in there. And so if they've come into my office and dropped off this resume, and their opening paragraph or their cover letter says something like, I'd like to use my skills in customer service and service industry to benefit your company. or I think my skills in the service industry or customer service could really benefit your company. And so if I read something like that, the resume usually doesn't go very far, because as a business person or an employer, I'm thinking, did this person even look at the front of my building, look at the business cards, our brochure, our website, to find out what it is that we do. I've even had resumes that specifically said, I want to expand and utilize my work in the food service industry on their resume that they dropped off on my front counter or to one of my staff. And so in that case, I'm thinking there was very little research done, because of course we don't have anything to do with the food service industry here at PNGI. And so even little things like that can really sort of turn off or start that initial relationship up on the wrong foot. So doing your homework is very important. We've had situations when we talk about challenges, which I'll talk about later on, but just to talk about this area, we've had situations where our own team members have gone in and submitted something to a business or an employer on behalf of one of their job seekers, and as a purely innocent error, they spelt the person's name wrong, or they spelt the business name wrong, or they got some little detail incorrect. And I'll tell you, the business person or that individual that's receiving this, that stands out like a red flag. That's what's going to be burned into their mind as they think about that resume or proposal or document that was dropped off. And so we need to really be careful that we've done our research and we know as much as we can, and the individual job seeker knows as much as they can about the business that we might be making a proposal to or approaching. Business people will definitely respect the fact that you've taken the time to learn about them. It always scores bonus points in many cases if you've actually gone to their website and looked them up. Businesses who have a website that they're proud of, that they put some work into, it often involves a lot of time. It could involve a lot of money, a lot of work to keep updated and going. And so if you're approaching them to ask for something or to look for an opportunity, the fact that you've actually spent the time to go and learn about them, research them, check out their website, and get all of those little details in order can be very helpful. As I said, if you're looking for ways to engage the individual that you're supporting to get the job, there's so many opportunities here where you can involve them, and so involve them in a non-threatening way. So if it's the beginning of this job search process, it can be intimidating to just start thinking about interviews or submitting an application or things like that. And so sometimes this warm-up stage where you're getting to know the employer by doing research can be a great opportunity for that individual that you're supporting to feel part of the process, but in a less threatening way. So going in and doing just observations in a workplace, going and gathering brochures and business cards, looking at websites, just making some initial contacts before you're even talking about a job, but just to learn about a business, being a customer, being a curious consumer. These all can gather valuable research, and they can be great tools for yourself and for your job seeker. So finding out ways to research and expand and build on what you know can be an important part of this whole job finding process. Another important part, factor number 3, is not waiting in line. And I'm sure that there's more than one on this webinar that has had this experience where you were trying to help somebody with a mental health issue or disability to become employed using some of the traditional ways of getting a job. And there's nothing wrong with that. Things like resumes, doing a work experience, putting in an application, things like that. Those are all fairly traditional ways of helping people become employed. But I'm sure there's many of us on this call that have had the experience where those traditional ways just don't work well. Where they're just not seeming to do the job. That resume just isn't getting the responses. The postings or online ads, they just don't seem to be suited to the person that you're trying to support to become employed. The opportunities seem to exclude them for one reason or another based on the way that the job posting is worded. They're not getting any callbacks. Just all those kinds of things can get very frustrating very quickly. And also, I would venture to bet that you've probably had somebody on your list of folks that you support who you're trying to help to become employed. And if you were to line them up, just like in that image on the PowerPoint slide there, if you were to line them up with all the other sort of typical job seekers that are applying, that might be applying for that job, they may stand out for one reason or another. And it might not be for a positive reason. It might just be something about them that makes them stand out from sort of a typical lineup of generic job seekers. Now, being different is wonderful, and we can celebrate that in most cases. But unfortunately, when it comes to employment, if you're standing out for whatever reason in a lineup of people, that can be a negative in terms of getting those callbacks or getting sort of sorted out in the early stages, filtered out in the early stages. So very early on, when we were looking at specialized employment services or working with people that had barriers to employment, sometimes multiple barriers to employment, we wanted to try to find a way to take that person out of the lineup. So take them out of the lineup altogether. Find some other ways other tools that can be used. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of where we've been able to take people out of the lineup from traditional employment. One of the earliest tools and most basic tools that we think of using when it comes to helping somebody become employed is that traditional resume. Now, resumes can be important. The information in them can be very important. They can be necessary for some employment positions. However, from our experience, what we found is that a lot of times resumes can actually be almost more of a tool for eliminating people than for actually getting them employment. And the reason why these can be seen as tools for eliminating people is because if an employer or an HR person gets a huge stack of resumes in for a job posting, one of the first things that they have to do is they have to sort through that big pile of resumes. And so they're going to be looking for anything that jumps out or stands out or any sort of red flags that people might be experiencing. Or that people are looking at in the resumes. And so what we're looking at with resumes is that if there's a gap, I bet that some people have worked with somebody through employment where they didn't have a long work history. Maybe they don't have any work history. And so that's a red flag on a resume. For people with resumes who've had long gaps in between jobs, or maybe they've had jobs where the jobs were very short in duration. And they had a whole long list of jobs that were very short in duration. These are things that might happen in a resume, in a person's resume that will show up as sort of a red flag. And so we want to, that's where it can become a tool of elimination instead of a tool to actually help them get employed. Sometimes those things that are seen as red flags don't directly relate to their actual abilities or their ability to do that particular job. They might be a very good candidate, but because their resume doesn't look as sort of typical as some of the other traditional resumes, they may stand out in that lineup. And so one of the things that we started to look at is a way to use an alternate to resumes. And in our practice, we use something called Jobseeker Profiles. And so a profile is not a resume. It's different. It contains some similar information to a resume, but there's some very unique parts to the profile. A profile is purposely not written in traditional resume format because in a traditional resume, there's some main categories: work experience, educational experience, and references and things like that. Those are two areas that can be troublesome to a number of people that we support. And so on a profile, we might still include work experience or education if there is something that's really good to celebrate. However, if the person doesn't have a lot of information to put into that category, on a traditional resume, if there's not enough information, you have to fluff it up. You have to find filler. You have to try to make it look like it fits that traditional model. With a profile, you don't have to. In fact, on our job seeker profile, which may be one page, you can leave out education altogether if there's not something to put in there, or if there's things that might raise red flags. Instead, we might want to look at focusing more on their abilities, on their actual experience, on their skill, on the things that set them apart from other people, qualities that they're really good at. Instead of a traditional reference name, we might include a quote from somebody that knows this person well or that's worked with them in the past. We might include very specific things, examples of transferable job skills or things that they've done that would be an asset to an employer. And so those things you can really bring out on something like a job seeker profile that maybe would look out of place on a traditional resume. And so we've had a lot of success with profiles. In fact, just as another example of how our job seeker profiles differ from a traditional resume. On a traditional resume, you're not supposed to put pictures. You're not supposed to put like a photo or anything like that of the person. But sometimes that can be important. And I'll tell you, when as a job developer, when I was going out, hitting the streets on behalf of somebody that was looking for a job, making that initial contact with potential employers, I would introduce myself in sort of a traditional way and say, hi, my name's Chris Arnold. I'm a job developer. I work with people with mental health issues or developmental disabilities. I would say some term like that in my introduction, and right away I'd see that employer's face start to sort of gloss over, and they'd get that panic look on their face like they were looking for a way out of the conversation. And I knew what was happening. After a few times, I could tell what was happening. They were taking that negative image of a person, some person with a mental health issue or a developmental disability that they'd known of in the past or that they'd seen. And in many cases, they're going to that worst case scenario. And that's the image that's popping into their head when they're thinking about this person that I'm representing. And even if I had a traditional resume for the person to offer, it doesn't get rid of that image in their head. And so I started to ask myself, how could we circumvent that? How could we replace that automatic stereotypic or negative image and replace it with a positive or a good image of that person? And so I said, well, I'm not doing a resume, I'm doing a profile, so there aren't any rules. So I'm going to go ahead and put a picture of this person. And so I actually would stage photos that related to the industry. For example, if I had somebody that was looking for a job in construction, I would take a photo of them in dirty clothes with a shovel and a reflective vest and a hard hat on. If I was looking for somebody or working with someone who wanted a job in an office, I would take a picture and I would stage it where they're in an office environment with a photocopier or a computer or at a customer service counter. We would create these positive images of the person, and it was the person, it was the actual person. We weren't using clip art or anything like that, but we were putting them into a context that would allow a potential employer to get over those sort of stereotypic or stigmatizing automatic images that come up in their head. So you can see how sometimes you can take the person out of that traditional lineup or those stereotypic views by using tools that are different. I have some information on job seeker profiles that I'm happy to share, and I think they can be posted to the PSR website if they're not already. So I'll make sure to send those links to Matthew so that you can have a look at them. There's a number of areas where we would look at having alternate approaches that are non-traditional that take the person out of the lineup. That resume versus profile example is just one. Another example would be we very rarely do work experiences. We help people by utilizing something called a situational assessment. And that's not something that I invented. That's something that's been in best practice in other areas for many years. But a situational assessment is it's a very supported and specific work experience. So instead of just dropping a person off at a workplace for a week to 6 weeks for a traditional work experience, and then you go back, a week later holding your breath, hoping that everything's going well, Instead of doing that, what we would do is that we would actually have our staff go on the work site with the person in a supportive role to assess how they're doing at the work experience. So we call that a situational assessment because our employment staff is actually assessing the person during their work experience. So of course these are shorter in duration because we can't afford to have our staff there for 6 weeks, but they're very specific, they're very intentional. We go into a workplace wanting to learn something specific about this job seeker or future employee, something about their abilities, how they deal with situations. The other thing is that sometimes somebody who doesn't have a long work history or who is anxious or has apprehensions about new situations, doing a situational assessment is very non-threatening. It's like a trial. It's like an experience where they get to go in. There's no pressure to get or lose the job because it's not a job. The work experiences often have that underlying intention or hope that the person will actually get hired. In fact, when we do situational assessments, if we have our eye on a particular employer, we actually won't go to them for the situational assessment. We'll go to one of their competitors or somebody in the same industry so that we can actually say, we're not here to get a job. We're just here to do an assessment and to learn some information about this person that will help them get a job. So there's no pressure for the employer who's hosting the situational assessment. And then what we do is once we learn everything we can about them in that similar environment, then we're prepared to go to the employer we actually have in our targets to actually put in a proposal to them for employment. And we've already tested things out with their competitor or in another situation. And so that can be a helpful situation as well. So you can see how you can take traditional things that aren't working well maybe for the person you're supporting or that are putting up barriers and find an alternate, a non-traditional or an alternate to the technique or tool that you can use. And so we built up lots of those over the years, from profiles to situational assessments. Instead of traditional applications, we rarely have people that would come into our employment programs. We would rarely have them just go and apply on a traditional existing job. We would be much more likely to do research with them, find an ideal spot or opportunity, and then actually with them write a job proposal and submit it to that employer. They might not even be hiring at the time. If we can spot an opportunity that will bring that employer more benefit than cost, and use our job seeker to help fill that, then we can write out a proposal to that business person. That's using business language, and in our experience, using that approach is extremely successful. We had very high success rates for the job proposals that we submitted for individuals as opposed to traditional job applications. And so all of these things are ways that we can help take our person that we're helping to support out of that traditional lineup of other job candidates, and it can really help to make the experience very personalized and individualized for the person, and it can make the employer feel that we're really also taking a unique approach and focusing on them as well. The fourth one, I had a couple of examples I was going to throw in here. I have a few stories or examples that I was scattering through, and I have permission from these individuals to tell their stories, and their names have been changed. But the examples here are just examples. We've worked with many people over the years, so it's always good to say that for some people, if you give an example, people might start to see that as the rule. It's not. This is just an example. This story happens to be at a golf course, and it was a really neat story because it talks about networking. It talks about using a unique approach. It talks about accommodations on the workplace. So for this fellow Jim at the golf course, we actually helped a fellow named Mike get a job at the Skeena Valley Golf and Country Club 14 years ago. And it was a really cool job. We wrote a job proposal. He went in. He needed some specific job accommodations for a physical disability that he had with his arms. He was doing lawn maintenance, grounds maintenance, operating the equipment, the weed whippers, the mowers, and all that. And so his employers, we worked with them, and they were actually very accommodating to just modify the grip on some of the equipment so that it would work for this original fellow, Mike. So he got that job in the summers, and he kept that job for 14 years. He's actually kept it longer than 14 years. But 14 years later, we actually were looking for a job for another fellow who had some unique barriers or challenges to employment. And so we started thinking about who we knew, because we weren't having a lot of success. We started thinking about using our networks and who we knew, who we had relationships with. We ended up having an employer recognition event. And one place that is great to host events like that in our community is at the Golf Country Club. They have a beautiful building overlooking this gorgeous golf course, and so we started working with the golf course. We happened to know that Mike was still working there, so we wanted to involve Mike. In fact, the golf course ended up winning an award at this recognition event, and so Mike was there. We strategically invited Jim and his parent to come to the luncheon event, the employer recognition event. Of course, we were looking at making introductions and that sort of thing. We had a bit of an ulterior motive within all of this, and it all worked out very well. And in fact, we were able to introduce Mike and Jim at the event, and as a result, it opened the door for us to go in and talk to Mike, who is now one of the supervisors in the ground maintenance department. And it opened the door for us to be able to go in and talk to him about this fellow Jim, who we were helping to find work. Jim needed some particular accommodations in the workplace. He had very specific requirements for us, and as job developers or job coaches or employment folks, for those of you who are in that role, you may have experienced this before. He was a young guy just out of high school, and he wanted, one of his criteria was he wanted a cool job. You know, it needed to be, he didn't want to work at McDonald's. He didn't see that as cool as a first job. He wanted something that was cool or different. He absolutely did not want to have anything to do with the public. He didn't like the public. He didn't want to deal with the public. And so we needed to find a job where he would not have a lot of exposure to the public. It made him really anxious. He liked to be independent. He liked to have a consistent job that he could learn, be comfortable with, and then do as much on his own as he could. There was one last requirement that was a real challenge for us, and that is that he was, he sort of identified as what they call a goth. And I kind of knew what a goth was before this, but I learned very quickly. He likes to wear particular kinds of clothes. He likes to, he's very particular about the way he dresses, and he was quite clear that he wouldn't work at a job where he couldn't dress the way that he wanted to and he felt comfortable. And that was often in black with different, you know, symbols and jewelry and things like that. And so this was a real challenge for our job developer. But one of the things, as just in the course of learning about this job at the golf course, that we recognized, and from talking with Mike, who we'd gotten a job 14 years earlier, we said, you know, this guy, he has a particular type of dress that he likes to wear, and it's important to him, and we're trying to find a workplace that would be accommodating to that. Mike right away and very, very upfront said, you know what, it really wouldn't matter here because you have to wear the overalls or the rain gear over top of the work, your clothes, whatever clothes you show up for to work. And so in fact, he would be perfectly able to wear his goth clothes to the golf course, believe it or not, because then he has to put on this cover-up gear over top of it. So, I mean, for him, it ended up working because it checked off his box of being able to wear his clothes to work, but he just had to put the rain gear or the other equipment over top afterwards. So in fact, it covered it up, and it wasn't an issue to anyone else. And so just to make the long story short, we certainly used some non-traditional ways. We wrote a job proposal. We did a trial, situational assessment to see how he would be. He actually fit in very well. Our previous relationship with Mike worked very much to our advantage, and so we were able to get him into that work situation. So when we talk about networking, I mean, 14 years is a long way to wait to see if he was still there. Oh, Bonnie's on the line. Excellent. Bonnie's actually the person that was working with us and actually facilitated that job. So that's great. Looking at the next one, Bev at Speedy Printers. This one was a great one because we utilized a few different tools that I was talking to you about. Bev was a lady who had a lot of really good skill as far as work went, but she was very particular as well about the types of places where she would work. One of the things about Bev was that she had a real interest in art. She was an artist. She actually drew a particular type of style, which was called anime, if people are familiar with anime art. And so anime, it's like an Asian influenced type of animation. And so she was very good at it. In fact, she was very talented. And so one of the things that she did, or that we did, was we actually used her own art on her Jobseeker profile. So she had a one-page Jobseeker profile, and on that profile it would have a picture of her in the corner. It would have a bit of an introduction, and then the whole page was filled with great things about her. But instead of just writing down that she's very artistic, as a trait, that might be something you'd put on a traditional resume, that she's very artistic. Instead of doing that, we actually gave her the challenge where we gave her a blank piece of paper, and we said, don't draw anything in the top, 2 or 3 inches, but fill the rest of the page with your anime art. And be as creative as you want to, as long as it's tasteful. And she did. She took up the challenge. She did a really cool page filled with these anime characters. And we actually took that, and I'm not overly technologically advanced, but I was able to take the image, scan the image of her art, and I turned it into a watermark on the page. And so it was actually just a little bit faded, and it was behind the text, and it was in like a light blue color, I think. So it was like the background for her Jobseeker profile was filled with her art. And so we didn't even have to go into great detail about explaining that she was artistic. We just made sure that we put a credit on there that this was actually drawn by her. The Speedy Printers is an office supply store in town. It's a more locally kind of owned chain, and they have a huge section that's their artist section, where they have canvases and paints and artist supplies. And so that was one thing that attracted her and us to their business. We did some situational assessments there, not really intending to pursue that as a workplace for her, but in fact it ended up being that way. She was really interested in the workplace. The people that were working there that were supporting her were very supportive and very open, and very accommodating to her. And so she really felt comfortable there. They liked her. They happened to be getting to a point where they were looking for having some extra staff help. They hadn't yet put the ad out in the paper, which was fantastic for us because we always like to get out of that lineup and get in on opportunities before they hit the paper or the online postings. And so we actually wrote a job proposal with her, and she was hired to the Speedy Printer team. A couple of the other things that we used in our job finding sort of skill sets, we used our own purchasing power, because it turns out that our agency had an account with Speedy Printers. Speedy Printers was one of 2 office supply stores in our community. The other one was Staples, which of course is more the big box chain. And so we really sort of promoted and utilized the angle of shopping local, using the local, supporting the local store, using our own purchasing power as a customer, and all those things together, I think, helped build up this proposal for Bev, and she was employed in the store. We, in fact, initially anticipated that she would be mainly working in the art supply section. However, they ended up finding out that she was extremely skilled in computer systems, and so they had a fairly elaborate computer sales system, point of sale system. It was all computerized and scanning and that sort of thing. It was fairly new, and a lot of the older staff were having real problems with this computer system and the technology. It turns out that Bev is a bit of a genius when it comes to that. So in fact, she ended up being pulled out of the art supply section and out to the more of the front counter, which is not where she saw herself doing sort of customer service, but she was so good on the computer that she could fix things and get things done very quickly.
Chris,
Looking at...
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Just have a couple of questions coming in. I'm wondering if this would be an appropriate time.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Two questions from Giovanna and Sandra revolving around self-identification as persons with lived experience of mental health challenges in general. So what the process of that looks like with employers, more specifically as well, education for employers about mental illness and psychosis specifically.
Right. Yeah, the looking at people living with mental health issues, and disclosure is definitely a big issue. When you have somebody that has a visible disability, it's not so much of an issue. But when you have somebody who's living with mental health issues, that certainly can be. In our practice, we really lead with the person because they're very self-conscious about disclosure with employers, or nervous, or they've had bad experiences in the past where disclosing has resulted in some problems. And so when we look at that, it can definitely be a challenge. We need to start with where the person's at. One thing that we've found is that by using some of these other non-traditional tools, things like the situational assessment, it helps in a few ways. Number one, we have our staff person in there to help sort of bridge, bridge the relationships, to help with if questions come up. Our staff person would actually work on preparing before going into a situational assessment or approaching an employer by almost rehearsing some of those answers to questions that we might expect could be asked. And so how would the person explain or answer if a question around their mental health issues or any disability or accommodations came up? So we could practice around that. So having the support person really available, starting with where the individual is at as far as disclosure, and working with that. We've had some individuals that didn't want to disclose, and you have issues like I think Giovanna was mentioning about rural settings, where in a small community, employers may know people that are coming to them for jobs. They may know some of the history or something about the person. It may or may not be accurate is one of the problems, or they might have some stereotypes or sort of preconceived ideas. With things like the situational assessment, where our staff is going in and supporting it, and it's done where it's done before the actual job proposal is done. So we find that a really good educational tool for employers, because you can bring people in a non-threatening, no obligation kind of way to learn or practice some on-the-job skills. And the employer and the coworkers are introduced to this individual. They see what they're able to do. They see what they're capable of, and they get to know them steps before you even take in a resume or a profile to apply for a job. And so when you think about that, it's a way to educate or expose the business person and the coworkers to the individual that you're working with before they're sort of taking that step and making the commitment to hire. And so sometimes, I mean, we've run into that a lot of times where, the employer or the coworker will say, oh, this person was great. They really did a good job. I can't believe how focused they were, or how well they stayed on task, or how, things like that. And so sometimes that can be a good educational part, when it comes to educating employers. So there isn't necessarily an easy answer specifically on the issue of disclosure, but I think that we have to be respectful of the person. We have worked with with individuals that absolutely did not want to disclose their mental health issues, and so the obstacles that can present is that if we need to look for an accommodation afterwards. So for example, let's say that they go through maybe cycles where their health is not as good and their mental health is not as good, and they may need time off work, or they may need some adjustment to their work schedule. That's going to be harder to address after the fact if you weren't upfront about that potential need in the beginning. And so we'll have that conversation with the job seeker at the very early stages before we ever get to the point of actually going into employers. And so those are some of the ways that we've dealt with that, and overall it's been very successful. So I hope that sort of answers some of those questions. Was there another one? Do people offer different levels of disclosure? For example, telling an employer that you have a mental illness as opposed to offering a diagnosis. Yes. Yeah, I think that's a good example as well. And we run into this in the disability community. There's a lot of invisible disabilities like autism spectrum or fetal alcohol disabilities that employers or people don't necessarily really understand. And so sometimes we take the strengths-based approach. When we promote a job seeker to our employers, we're really talking about their strengths, their abilities, and then that kind of opens the door to then have a discussion about possible accommodations in the workplace. Usually the accommodations that people need, even people with mental health issues, those accommodations are not ones that are overly expensive or overly difficult for the employers, and so sometimes if we can be upfront about that with the employer as well, that can be helpful. It can kind of ease their minds about things that they might run into after the fact. The other thing is during our initial intake and discovery, if we know of accommodations that might be necessary, or we know that a person, for example, will go through periods of time where they may have time off work or they may need time off on occasion, that's going to direct the types of jobs that we look for. So we're going to be specifically researching jobs where we know that scheduling might be flexible, or there might be options for things like sharing, job sharing, or things like that. So as the job support person, we're going to be thinking about those things at the earliest stages instead of just getting a typical sort of traditional job and then having to go back afterwards and ask for all of those supports. Supports versus, Bonnie, Jim is no longer at the golf course. Mike is still at the golf course, but Jim has actually moved on, and he's done a couple of other things after that. But he did stick out the golf course for the whole summer and part of the next one as well. Looking at, Regina had mentioned about talking about the differences between supports versus accommodations. For supports, you're looking at the support that we might actually provide as a support person on the job. And in our case, those supports were usually sort of front-end supports where we would go in initially if the person and the employer were receptive to that, to actually support the person on the job through job coaching, through training, through building up relationships or networks within the workplace. Those are all supports that we could offer to the workplace. Supports might also include education for the team, for the employer, around the person, around their position. If it was a customized position that was created for them, there might be some training or education needed, that sort of thing. Accommodations are more things that are put in place from the employer regarding job duties, job schedule, how to respond if issues arise in the course of the work. Accommodations are maybe changes or modifications or adjustments that are made or negotiated with the employer, and those sort of stay in place even after the support person is gone. And so that's sort of the difference as I see it between support versus accommodation. Hopefully that answers those questions. Let me just go to the next slide here. I'm just conscious of the time. We're doing reasonably well, but I want to make sure that we have some time because there may be some questions at the end as well. Key factor to success number 4, level playing field. I've already sort of introduced this through the previous 3 points a little bit. So basically what I'm talking about is looking at having a level playing field by using a business approach instead of sort of a social approach or a charity model. What we want to do is we want to be able to go in to a business a place of business go or approach a business person, or have our job seeker approach that place of business or the business person by using a business approach. That's what really they understand. They also understand a charity model. I mean, business people have lots of people coming to them asking for donations, asking for charitable donations or promotions or things like that. And what we've found is that we really want to separate the two. After years of working with people with barriers to employment or various disabilities, mental health issues, one thing that we know for certain is that people can work. People can be valuable employees with all different types of ability levels. And in fact, they can add things to the workplace that a generic or typical person without those barriers might not be able to. So we know that there's value in the folks that we are helping to support to become employed. And so we want to be able to have business people also see that. And so one of the best ways to do that is by making a business case, using a business approach to things. And so for example, by writing a proposal, an employment proposal, and presenting that to an employer instead of just applying on a job or going in and asking for what opportunities are available for employment. The proposal is basically presenting on a silver platter an opportunity that you've noticed in their workplace through your research that this individual that you're supporting to become employed could help them fill, could help them meet. And so if there's an issue in the workplace and you think you've got the perfect person that could help that employer meet that issue or need, you can write it up into a proposal and say, here's what we noticed. Here's an idea for you to consider. If you hire this person to do this, we think that that would be a great step in meeting that need or addressing that issue for your business. And then these are sort of some of the logistics of how that might work out. So a job proposal is very much a business approach. And the nice thing about when we've used job proposals in our experience is that you don't need to wait for the ad to be posted. You don't need to wait for a position to become available. If you can go in there and do some research and find an opportunity within that business that can, and you can show the employer how your idea could bring more value than cost. If they hire this individual, it could bring them more value than cost. That's a business approach. It's a business case. And really, any employer will hire any employee that can bring more value than cost. And so that's really the slogan that we started looking at. When we were looking at presenting, using a more level playing field and using a business approach, we really looked at writing job proposals as a main tool for helping people that had barriers to employment to become employed. And we had as I mentioned earlier, we had a very high success rate with that. Employers really like it when you cut to the chase. You have an opportunity, you've already teased out some of the information, done some of the research, tested out some of the skills, and you basically have an offer now to present to them. So that's another interesting tool that you can use to level the playing field. This is just a sample of sort of 5 sections to a job proposal, and I mean there can be whole course seminars just on job proposal writing. It's certainly an elaborate process, but it's not. It's a fairly straightforward process once you understand it. So in our job proposals, we usually cover 5 sections. Just so that you know, to put it in context, we always aim to have it on 1 page or maybe 2 pages, so 1 page double-sided. We want to keep it short and sweet, to the point. We don't want to have a lot of filler. We just want to get to the details of what we're proposing to the business. So we have an introduction. We outline the benefits, what our job seeker could do for them that would be a benefit to their business. We write out the actual proposal. Here's what we suggest that we're proposing that you do, and that involves hiring this person. We tell a little bit about the person we have in mind, although we don't want to copy everything from their resume or profile because we'll be attaching that to the job proposal. And then the position. The nice thing about presenting a proposal is that, in fact, in many cases, you then have an opportunity to actually set some of the terms or suggest some of the terms. So we've actually been forward enough to actually suggest a rate of pay if it was different than sort of the minimum wage, but more industry standard, we could actually suggest a range or a rate of pay. We can suggest hours, which is really important because sometimes the folks that we're helping to get work, they have some specific accommodations that they need around hours for whatever reason. So we can say, we would propose that this person start off at this rate of pay on this kind of schedule. If that meets your needs, it's open to negotiation, of course, and there may be some back and forth. But if you sort of present it as that, you've already planted the seed or set the table. And so the employer, instead of the employer waiting for them to post a position on an online job posting or in a newspaper, they've already set the table, set the criteria around that position. So by doing a job proposal, we're kind of getting in a different way. Job proposal. I do have some actual some documentation or information sheets on job proposals, and I'd be happy to have Matthew post them as well after the webinar. Giovanna asks, what is non-aversive behavior management? Oh, that's you must have been looking at some information on our website. The non-aversive behavior management is another training topic that we speak at through the provincial networking group. It's basically looking at using an educative approach to behavior change as opposed to eliminative approaches. So non-aversive behavior management is focusing on positive behavior supports is probably the more current term that people would recognize. Looking at the next slide here, Arthur at the Major Furniture. I'm actually going to just skip through Arthur because if I tell too many stories, I won't have time for questions. Last point on the key factors for success is to see opportunity everywhere. And one of my favorite quotes, and I don't have a reference source for this, I heard it myself somewhere at a workshop or something before, and it's this quote that says, some people walk through the forest and never see the firewood. And so by the firewood, I'm talking about job opportunities. And the forest is sort of the world, the business community, your neighborhood, all the places you frequent as a customer. There's so many opportunities out there. Opportunities really are endless if we look at it through that lens. And so we need to start training or programming ourselves to see the potential everywhere. Every business has needs or problems that you might be able to help solve, or that a person that you're supporting to get employed might be able to help. Not every opportunity equals a job, though, which is why it's important to see opportunity everywhere, because you might see, I can think of all kinds of opportunity. I can walk into a business and do that, or if they just did this a little differently, this would be great. I can spot all kinds of opportunity. Just because there's an opportunity or a problem happening, it doesn't mean that that equals a job. But if we can do some research and sort of find a way to work that into a job where it brings more value than cost, that's where seeing lots of opportunity could sort of percolate down into some really good jobs. Job developer toolkits I see pop up. Yeah, job developer toolkits are also a tool that we've developed. It's an actual toolkit that has 4 booklets in it on non-traditional job development topics, and they are available. They're available through, I think they might still be available through Aspect, if people are familiar with it. It's a BC Provincial Association, or through PNGI's website as well. Not every job opportunity equals a job, so we have to see as many as possible. When you think about the old traditional model of cold calling, you'd have to make how many phone calls before you got one job lead? It's kind of along those lines. We need to see endless opportunity in order to make sure that we have enough opportunities that actually pan out for people we're supporting. If we don't have that abundance mentality or the ability to see opportunity everywhere, we can get really discouraged. And being from a rural community in the north, when I first moved up here, the early years, it was booming. The forest industry, everything else, there were jobs everywhere. There was 0 vacancy rates for apartments. It was just booming. Everybody was working. People were excited and happy and all of that sort of thing. But then there was a number of years where we'd see this headline in the newspaper, and this was actually a headline, but we'd see this headline come up multiple times during the year, And for a job developer, if you constantly read the Northwest jobless rate is the highest in BC, it often said that we were double the provincial average for unemployment. That can be really discouraging if that's what you're focusing on. So we tried, even though I clipped out that newspaper article just for illustration purposes, we basically paid no attention at all to it. Because as long as we kept going out and seeing opportunity everywhere, using the business approach and non-traditional techniques, every single year we were still able to help create jobs and employment for people that had challenges to becoming employed. And so it sort of spoke to, it was sort of the proof in the pudding, so to speak. Now, the last part that I wanted to talk about, you can't just talk about successes without also talking about challenges. And in fact, sometimes the challenges become our biggest learning opportunities, and we learn a lot from our challenges or failures. And so we need to look at some of those. So with challenges, one of the challenges can be, quite frankly, our own assumptions on limitations that we put on the people that we support. Sometimes we just we get into that mode where we make assumptions about the types of jobs that somebody with a particular disability or mental health issue might or might not be able to do. One of my favorite examples, and I know this isn't specific to mental health, but disability field, is the story of the blind mechanic. And in fact, if you Google blind mechanic, I was able to come up with 6 or 8 specific links to stories or YouTube videos about people who were visually impaired who were actually working as mechanics. And so some of these stories are really inspirational. It came about because I heard about a fellow in Saskatchewan at a conference that I went to where the Ministry of Transportation for the province of Saskatchewan, they had all these highways departments. And one of the managers that oversaw one of the large departments for highways, he actually ended up hiring a blind mechanic. And at first he thought it was the most absurd thing he'd ever heard of. How could a person who is blind possibly be a mechanic? And we put those assumptions or limitations out there without really understanding. And in fact, how it ended up working out is that if you know a mechanic or anybody is mechanically inclined, when you talk to mechanics, they'll often tell you they can't even see what they're working on. They're on their back, reaching up, in dark, dingy, oil, grease-covered places. And so really their sense of touch and feel can be as important as their sight when it comes to the actual mechanical work. And I had never thought about that as being an advantage or a skill. You have somebody who's blind, their other senses are so heightened in many cases, and they have so much skill in other areas, like in touch, that they can tell things by their hearing, by their touch, by smell, by all these things. They can get over obstacles that a sighted person would have potentially. And so in fact, this mechanic was completely blind, visually impaired, and he was an expert in automotive and mechanical work. Since then, like I said, there's multiple stories of people who were visually impaired who became fantastic mechanics. So things like that can put up obstacles or limitations when they're not really obstacles or limitations. So that's certainly one of the challenges that we can have. Another challenge can be not digging deep enough. Sometimes we need to actually dig or learn some key points about the person we're supporting because they could present barriers when it comes to actually looking at a particular job. Sometimes it's easy just to take that person's very first skill or interest and run with it and think, oh, they like computers. Okay, let's go look for jobs in the area of computers. But in fact, if any of you have had a hobby, you might like to garden, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily want to do that as your paid occupation. In fact, if you turn your love for gardening into a job, then it becomes a job. And maybe it loses some of that appeal. So we've fallen into that trap before where we thought, oh, you like computers, okay, let's go running in that direction. When in fact, we really need to step back and learn and listen to the person and sort of understand and dig deep about what motivates them, what really makes them tick, what really sort of appeals to them as far as a job, a work situation. And one of the best stories I had about that was a young man who he loved automotive. He loved working on cars and trucks with his dad. His dad was in the trucking industry. They had a huge shop. And so we thought, obviously, we need to help this guy get a job in the automotive industry. He was totally keen on that. Our job developers went out and used their networks and found a fantastic job opportunity at one of the larger dealerships in our community. And it was going to be doing automotive work. You know, it wasn't just sweeping the floors or that sort of thing. He was actually going to have some opportunities to get in there and get dirty and get his hands on the vehicles and things like that. So we presented this we were very excited and presented this opportunity to this fellow, and he asked where it was, and we said it was at the Ford dealership, and he just blatantly turned it down and said, no thanks. And we were very frustrated, and we thought, what do you mean no? This is the perfect job for you. We did all this work. We used our networks. We actually phoned his dad. We thought maybe his dad could convince him to take this job. And his dad's like, well, we said to him, he's turned down this job. It seems like the perfect opportunity, working in automotive, and a good opportunity for him. And his dad's like, oh, what's going on? I don't know why. And he said, where was the job at? And they said, well, it was at the Ford dealership. And his dad said, oh, no, that won't work. And so, a big automotive person myself, I didn't understand what this barrier was until we dig deep enough, and we learned, and they just said it in one line. They said, we're Chevy men. And it was going to them, it would be so faux pas to actually work at Ford. And like I said, I don't know what that's about, but there's strong feelings or ties. It could be other things. It could be around political reasons or environmental reasons or religious reasons or things like that. We need to make sure that we understand those important parts so that we can hopefully eliminate those potential blocks before they become an issue. Another challenge can be systems limits. Within systems where we can't bill for that, the job coach can't work on the weekends. We can only support up to 4 weeks, and then they're on their own. We can't fund transportation. These are just all examples. I'm sure that some of you have heard of these systems limits come up for people, and there may be a reason behind it, but in most cases, our systems are meant or intended to help people become employed. That's if we're working in that role, usually that's an essential sort of quality or inherent sort of building block for the systems that we work within. So the only thing I can suggest for this is always keep that in mind. And if there's something that just doesn't make sense, or there's a particular need for the person that you're supporting to get a job, challenge those limits. Challenge them. Ask the questions. Ask why this is a rule. Because in fact, if you do that, there may very well be a workaround. There may be a way to, either dig under, climb over, or blow up that wall that's being put in your way. And so ask those questions, challenge those limits, because at the heart of most of our services that involve holistic supports or employment in some way is the basic intention that we want to help people become employed. We don't want to put up limits. And don't get stuck in the box. Sometimes we can get stuck inside the box, and we always want to be able to think bigger, to think outside of the box. We don't need to be an expert in everything. In fact, in our experience, it's better not to be an expert in everything, because then you can approach the people who are the experts and ask them for a tour, ask them for an interview, because you want to learn from them. You want to learn about their industry, you want to learn about the types of work that's done and how it's done and things like that. So sometimes being comfortable in admitting that we're not the experts in every industry, and let's go out and utilize the people that are to the benefit of the person we're supporting. Oops. Okay, so we do have some time for questions. I'm very happy that I was able to skip a story and talk a little faster and get to this point, because I would like to try to answer a few more of your questions if you have them. I just want to show the resource page. There's a few examples of people that have, or places that have some good resources available. Denise Bissonette is sort of our guru in employment and non-traditional employment, and she's the author of Beyond Traditional Job Development, and her website is there. She has a free newsletter and lots of great material that you can find and learn, and she has YouTube videos and everything else. Douglas College offers an employment specialty series, which is, I believe, accepting intakes now, and it's 5 units, credit course on specialized employment services, and I've been an instructor in one of their courses through that. And it's got some good material. My website is there, and Making It Work is one of the training programs that I do in specialized employment services. I'm going to be touring around the province next month. I'm going to be in Abbotsford, I'll be in Langley, I'll be in Vernon. So you can, we have a schedule on our the front page of our website, so you can find out information about that. Also, some of the links, I see Matt posted a link to the Job Developer Toolkit. And I'm going to make sure that we have some resources posted on the website that you can just download after the training today. So other questions? I think that there was one that I can't see because it's scrolled up now, but is there any other questions that I can answer in the last few minutes that we have? How do you describe the people you support to an employer without referring specifically to their mental health issues? I will take approaches like saying that we're a job developer that helps individuals find employment. If they don't want us to specifically talk about their mental health issues, then we'll talk more about ourselves. We'll talk more about our agency and the fact that we provide specialized employment services. We do things like customized employment, where we look for opportunities within a job that fit a specific person. We talk about business proposals that we submit, where we look for opportunities and then try to match them with people. You know, a lot of employment type agencies will use that common slogan that says, we pre-screen in candidates for your workplace, which is a great line to use, but in fact, a lot of times it's not completely accurate because they spend a lot of time learning about the person and pre-screening the job seeker, but they don't spend enough time learning about the business. And so I find that if we use that business approach, it often takes the focus off of a specific ability or disability for the person, and so that's one way that we've used to help with that. When was the Job Developer Toolkit put together? Going to try to get this ordered from our office. The Job Developer Toolkit has been a work in process for 18 years. What we did was we were getting a lot of requests for certain types of non-traditional or specialized employment support, things that we use within our own agency. And so we took some of our own training material and put them into booklet form. It actually started as a resource for a conference that I was speaking at, and then it sort of developed from there because people were requesting it. So there's 4 toolkits currently, and we're actually working on 2 additional booklets. There's 4 booklets in the toolkit, 2 additional ones. So there is a booklet on job proposals. There is a booklet on Jobseeker Profiles. There's one on brainstorming, and there's a 4th one that's slipping my mind at the moment. And so yeah, that's you can go to our website for some more information on that. 18 years. Yeah, we've been around for a long time, so it's tried and tested, and I can tell you that we weren't just working with sort of cream of the crop people. We've worked with people with all different ability levels and different types of barriers and strengths when it came to employment. All right, any other questions? There's a few more minutes as I check my clock on the wall. The next one that I'll be involved in presenting on April 29th for the Psychosocial Rehab group is on positive behavior supports in employment. And I'm excited about this one because this is a new topic that we've been presenting on. My background is as a behavior consultant, and I kind of stumbled across employment as a specialty 20 years ago. And so I'm excited to merge those two topics, positive behavior supports and employment, because one of the realities that we found is that often the folks we're supporting, we can help them get the job, but sometimes keeping the job can be a challenge. And in many cases, they don't necessarily lose the job because they can't do the job. They lose the job for other reasons, for example, other behavioral situations that come up. So this is a brand new program that I've just put together, and so I'm excited to be able to do an hour and a half a teaser or snip and include some information on the 29th. So if you can sign up for that one, that would be a great one to sign up for.
So Chris, just a big thank you from Matt, myself, from PSR BC, and for everybody on the line. Just want to say a big thank you very much for spending your morning with us. I think, Chris, that the thing that really strikes me as the gift that you provide us is your specialty knowledge and your pragmatic approach and your, I don't know, discarding of rules. These are all wonderful characteristics and competency that you just seem to do with this ease, Chris. The other thing that really strikes me too is just your connection with the community. It seems to me, having tried to help people get some jobs in my OT career, that what you seem to have an amazing handle on is a connection with different organizations in your local community, whereby you can come by and kind of convince people that they need to hire people for particular jobs. I don't think I've ever enjoyed that kind of deep connection that you have. So I just want to celebrate that you've obviously put a lot of time and effort into that, but it's certainly showing success for people you deliver service to. So a big thank you, Chris, for your presentation today.
You're welcome.
Okay, all. Thanks so much once again, Chris, and to all our attendees. It was absolutely fantastic having everyone out. We're really excited by this relaunch, and it couldn't have been a better session to start with a better presenter. So thank you, everyone. We'll really look forward to seeing you again, whether you're coming to join us on another session in this series or another series. A reminder that all are available at the website www.psyrehab.ca/workshops. And our next session in this series is going to be taking place on March 4th, which is 2 weeks today, and it will be with Catherine Newstead, profiling individual placement and support and evidence-based employment support practice. All right, well, take care, and we'll see you then.